have Allan Legere. Allan Legere is a Canadian serial killer who on June 21st of 1986 entered a convenience store in Black River Bridge, New Brunswick with two other accomplices and robbed the joint. While doing so, they beat the store owner to death, but they were later caught and arrested. He was given a life sentence and sent to prison. However, in 1989, he managed to escape and was on the run for 7 months. During this time, he killed 4 more innocent people. He also committed arson and a list of other crimes as well. Eventually, he was recaptured and is now spending the rest of his life in Canada's maximum security special handling unit. Moving on to number 8, we have Rodney Halbauer. Ever since Rodney was young, he has been committing crimes. It started when he was only 16 years old. During his younger years, he was arrested and released on parole a number of times. But when released, he would commit more crimes, like theft. In 1975, Rodney was released on bail after taking advantage of a Las Vegas blackjack dealer. But while on bail, he took advantage of and killed 6 other women and received a life sentence. However, in 1977, he actually escaped jail and kidnapped his own daughter. Shortly after, he was recaptured, only to escape again in 1986. While on the run, he stabbed and injured another woman. Thankfully, once again, he was recaptured. Wouldn't you think after the first time they would keep a closer eye on him? I guess not. In our 7th spot, we have Thomas Silverstein. Now, this dude is said to be one of the most dangerous prisoners of all time, and the most violent prisoner in America. He was first jailed in 1978 for armed robbery. While in jail, he killed a prison officer and 2 inmates. He also was the leader for the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang for quite some time. This prison gang is the largest and deadliest prison gang in the US, with an estimated 20,000 members inside the prison and on the streets. Because of how many people he killed and injured in prison, Silverstein got transferred to a federal prison in Atlanta. There, he was confined in a 6-by-7-foot cell. He was under 24-hour surveillance. In fact, the lights in his cell were never turned off so that they could always watch him. Silverstein eventually died in prison at the age of 67. In our 6th spot today, we have Victor Figueroa. On February 6, 1997, Victor Figueroa managed to escape Maroa Shock Incarceration Facility in Mineville, New York. Victor had been serving a 1 to 4 year sentence for drug possession, but decided to take his chances and flee. When authorities noticed that he was missing, they searched the area, but all the leads ran cold. He has not been seen or heard from since. In fact, he's the only New York State prison inmate to escape and never be found. Either he's still out there or he died while trying to escape. Either way, it's a bit scary thinking that he could potentially still be out there. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with James Eddie Diggs. To the public, James Eddie Diggs seemed like a top-notch citizen. He seemed to be a great family man with a happy wife and 2 young sons. However, in the morning of May 26, 1949, he shot and killed his wife and kids before disappearing forever. Police did manage to find him a week later, but he managed to escape the officer by shooting him in the face and killing him. He since fled into the woods and hasn't been caught since. In fact, he was one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives for the longest time, but he was eventually removed from the list in 1961 and is said to be dead by now. In our 4th spot, we have Robert Maudsley. Robert Maudsley is considered Britain's most dangerous prisoner, and you're about to find out why. In 1974, Maudsley was arrested for taking advantage of young individuals, but during his trial, he was found unfit and was sent to Broadmoor Hospital instead of a prison. While there, Maudsley and another patient locked themselves in a cell with another patient and held him hostage. While there, they tortured him to death over a period of 9 hours. After this incident, he was convicted of manslaughter and was sent to Wakefield Prison. And there, he killed 3 inmates, after which he got placed in solitary confinement and spends his life in a glass cell underneath Wakefield Jail. In our 3rd spot, we have George Edward Wright. In 1962, George Edward Wright was convicted for murder and was sentenced to up to 30 years in prison. Wright and 3 other men went on a spree of armed robbery, one in which they shot a man and took off with his money, which was only $70, so was it really worth it? Anyways, they were caught and put into jail. But then in 1970, Wright managed to escape from a prison in New Jersey. He was caught and locked up once again, only to escape once more in 1972. This time, he made sure he was never going to be caught again. So he came up with a plan. This plan involved hijacking a Delta Airlines flight and collecting ransom for the release of the passengers. Upon doing so, they flew the plane to Portugal. In 2011, the police caught up with him in Portugal, but since Portugal has no extradition treaty with the United States, Wright was released. He remains a fugitive to this day. Coming in at number 2, we have Eric Rudolph. In 1996, Eric Rudolph bombed Atlanta's Centennial Olympic Park during the Summer Games. As a result, 2 individuals were killed and over 100 were injured. But that was just the beginning of his deadly bombing spree. He pulled off 3 more bombings, injuring hundreds more. For 5 years, the police were on a hunt for Eric. At one point, he was one of the top 10 fugitives on the FBI's list. It wasn't until 2003 that Eric got arrested. Turns out that he was hiding in the mountains for 5 years. Being a skilled outdoorsman, this helped him greatly. When he was caught, he pled guilty to all 4 bombings and was given 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He's now spending the rest of his life in the super prison in Florence, Colorado. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Santiago Mederos. In 2010, Santiago fired into a random person's car because one of the passengers was wearing the wrong color jacket. The victim had no ties to any gang. He was just an innocent person riding in his sister's car. He was severely injured and his sister was unfortunately killed. A couple weeks later, Santiago and some of his friends were robbing a car, and when a group of men tried to stop them, he shot at them as well. He killed a random person that was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. From there, he was on the run for about a decade. Starting off this countdown, we have the Hitchhiker's Killer. The Hitchhiker's Killer is the name given to serial killer Donald Henry Gaskins. He started his killings in 1969, where he would pick up hitchhikers to later kill them. It's believed that he killed more than a dozen people. But even before he went on this killing spree, Gaskins had a history of sick crimes. Finally, on November 14th of 1975, Gaskins was arrested after a man witnessed him killing 2 men and called the police. He was later sentenced to death, but this sentence turned into life imprisonment without any possibility of parole. However, his killings did not stop while behind bars. While in prison, he became the only man to have ever killed an inmate on death row. In our 9th spot today, we have Glenn Stark Chambers. In January of 1975, Glenn Stark Chambers got into a heated dispute with his girlfriend, Connie Weeks. It ended with him taking her life. As a result, he was sentenced to death by electric chair, later reduced to life imprisonment. However, Glenn escaped prison on July 13th. Glenn, with 2 other inmates, ganged up to attack their detention officer and then escaped through a window. Now, he was captured 3 days later, but only to escape several years later. So he worked with the prison to help build furniture. He came up with a good idea to put himself into one of the boxes and have himself carried out of prison in a transport truck, and it worked. Even after 3 decades, Glenn has never been found. If he was still alive today, he would be in his 70s, so he could still be out there somewhere. In our 8th spot, we have Ted Bundy. Now, what was so scary about Ted Bundy is how smart he was. He was the definition of evil genius. So basically, he would use his smarts to manipulate women and then kill them. Bundy is said to be responsible for murdering 30 women, although it's thought that his number is much higher. Now, Bundy was actually able to escape custody multiple times. The first time, he jumped out of a 2nd-story building and fled while at the courthouse. He had planned this for days, practicing jumping from his top bed bunk in prison down to the floor to strengthen his ankles. Now, eventually he was caught, but then a while later, he escaped again. This time, he forced himself to lose weight in order to squeeze through a hole in his cell ceiling. When he did escape the 2nd time, he went on to murder more women, until being caught once again. In our 7th spot, we have Charles Manson. Infamous cult leader Charles Manson, who led the Manson family cult, had his followers commit crimes and murders on his behalf. Some of his members committed a series of 9 murders in July and August of 1969. In 1971, Manson was convicted of 1st-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of 7 people, including film actress Sharon Tate. What's scary about Manson is that he was also an evil genius. If you've ever seen his interviews, he acts quite wild and strange. People think that he's out of his mind. At one point, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoid delusion disorder, but some people think that he was just too smart for his own good and he was just faking all of this. In 1971, Manson received the death sentence, but a year later, the government got rid of capital punishment, so his sentence was changed to life in prison instead. In our 6th spot, we have Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Between 1963 and 1965, Ian Brady Harvey and Myra Hindley worked together to torture, take advantage of, and kill a number of young individuals. What they did was incredibly messed up, and it'll make your stomach churn. Now, these two were actually given the name the Moors Murderers because after taking the lives of their victims, they would bury their bodies on the moors outside of Manchester. Both individuals were sentenced to life in prison for their crimes. Ian was actually placed in solitary confinement, whereas Myra died in prison in 2002. We are now at our fifth and halfway mark with Lester Eubanks. In 1965, Lester was convicted of taking the life of Mary Ellen Deaner. As a result, he was given the death penalty, which later got changed to a life sentence. Now, over the years in prison, apparently Lester changed his ways and became very well behaved. In fact, on December 7th, 1973, they let him go out to Christmas shop for his family. While out in a mall, he managed to escape his guards and flee. To this day, he still hasn't been caught. He's out there somewhere in hiding. Who knows where he fled to or what he's up to now. Coming in at number 4, we have Robert William Fisher. Now, this guy is one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. He is on the run after a triple homicide and arson. On April 9th, 2001, Fisher took the lives of his wife and 2 children before blowing up their house. It is still unclear as to why he did this, and he's been on the run ever since. And police have no leads. On April 20th, his car was found in a forest near Payson, Arizona, but Robert was nowhere to be found. On November 3rd, 2021, Fisher was removed from the FBI's most wanted fugitives list. But despite them doing this, he still remains a very wanted fugitive. In our third spot, we have Bradford Bishop. Bradford Bishop Jr. is a former United States Foreign Service officer who is now a wanted fugitive. On March 1st of 1976, Bishop started to spiral after not receiving the promotion he really wanted. He then left his work early, drove to the bank, withdrew money, and then bought a sledgehammer, gas can, shovel, and pitchfork. He then returned home where he killed his wife, mother, and 3 sons. He then drove the bodies several miles away before burying them in a wooded swamp area before setting them on fire. As a result, he was placed on the FBI's list of 10 most wanted fugitives. They have no clue as to where Bishop is now. He could be anywhere, but they do believe that he fled to Europe. Moving on to number 2, we have Arthur Hutchinson. Arthur Hutchinson has lived a life of crime for murder, attempted murder, theft, and burglary. In fact, he spent 5 years in prison for the attempted murder of his half-brother. In September of 1983, he was brought into a police station after being arrested for theft. While there, he asked to go to the bathroom and then proceeded to jump out of the bathroom window and fled. He was on the run for 3.5 weeks. While on the run, he crashed a wedding and murdered the bride's father, mother, and brother. Later that day, he broke into another person's home and stabbed all 3 of the residents to death. He was finally caught on November 5th of 1983 and sentenced to life imprisonment. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Ahmed Siraji. From 1986 to 1997, Ahmed took the lives of 42 females. The bodies of his victims were found in a sugarcane field. What he would do was, after killing them, he would bury them waist deep in his field with their heads facing his house. He believed that by doing so, this gave him great power. But he was later caught and arrested alongside his sisters and 3 wives who helped him. One of his wives was actually sentenced to death, but that was later changed to life imprisonment. Ahmed, on the other hand, was sentenced to death by a firing squad in 2008. Starting off this countdown, we have Donald Harvey, aka the Angel of Death. Donald Harvey is a nurse turned serial killer. So he was working in a hospital as a nurse and was secretly killing off his patients. To him, he was doing them a favor. He thought that his chronically ill patients needed a relief from the pain, so he would smother them with pillows or would poison them or let their oxygen tanks run out. It's believed that he took the lives of over 70 people. However, in 1987, he was only convicted for 37 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life plus 20 years. In March of 2017, Harvey was beat up badly by a fellow inmate. He passed away shortly after. In our 9th spot, we have Albert Desalvo. Albert Desalvo, better known as the Boston Strangler, took the lives of 13 women between 1962 and 1964. He would strangle these women with a piece of their clothing before taking advantage of them. In January of 1967, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. A month later, him and 2 other inmates actually managed to escape from prison, and a full-scale manhunt ensued. Thankfully, it wasn't long until he was recaptured. However, in 1973, Albert was stabbed to death by another prisoner. In our 8th spot, we have Ronnie McPeters. Now, Ronnie McPeters has actually been deemed too insane to execute. So Ronnie was first arrested after taking the life of a 27-year-old woman. The woman, Linda Marie Baltazar, was running errands when Ronnie came up to her window while panhandling. She shooed him away and he left, but he ended up coming back and shooting her. He was first placed in jail for his crime and then placed in the rubber room. But that didn't stop him because he was known to set fires in the jail and harass other inmates. So they moved him to San Quentin prison where he was awaiting death row. And that's when he started acting even crazier. Apparently he would attack other prisoners and guards, and was known to smear his feces all over his cell and even himself. This behavior got him off of death row. They literally thought that he was far too troubled to be executed. In our 7th spot, we have Mark Chopper Reed. Mark Reed is an Australian criminal who lived a life of crime. He was known to rip off drug dealers, as well as he would kidnap and torture members of the criminal underworld. It's believed that he was responsible for the death of 19 people and the attempted murder of 11 others. In fact, the movie Chopper is based off of his life, and it's a wild movie. The things he would do were insane. For example, he had a fellow inmate cut both of his ears off so that he could leave H Division and be transferred to a different wing. He also once played Russian roulette with himself. Who does that for fun? In our 6th spot today, we have Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer is one of the most famous serial killers in the world. People all around the world know of him and the sadistic and disturbing crimes that he committed. From 1978 to 1991, Jeffrey murdered and dismembered 17 male individuals. What he did afterwards was even more disturbing. He would keep some of the body parts as souvenirs, even take photographs of the deceased. When police searched his home, they found it littered with human remains. Dahmer was finally arrested on July 22nd of 1991. However, while in prison, there were multiple attempts on his life. On November 28, 1994, an inmate, Christopher Scarver, finally succeeded at taking Dahmer's life. His reasoning behind this? Well, apparently Dahmer was known to taunt others in prison. He would do this by making his prison food look like severed limbs to taunt the other people. He would even drizzle ketchup on top of his blood. Christopher and others found this very unnerving, so he decided to take action against him and beat him to death. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Jason Barnum, aka better known as Eyeball Man. And that's because he literally has a tattoo on his eyeball. Like, he tattooed it completely black. If that doesn't speak volumes about who he is, then I don't know what does. He also has one side of his face tattooed to look like a skull. So not only does this dude look like a scary prisoner, but he is one. This dude has a long list of crimes under his belt, including possession of heroin, first-degree attempted murder, first-degree burglary, and third-degree felony in possession of a weapon. In fact, he was sentenced to 22 years in jail after shooting a police officer. Moving on to number 4, we have Nikko Jenkins. This guy is one of the scariest inmates in the world. Some say he is the craziest inmate in the world, and you're about to find out why. One time, he killed a man just because he stared at him the wrong way. Not only that, but in court, Jenkins was known to speak in some weird language. He said he used this language to communicate with an Egyptian serpent god, and this god was the one giving him orders to kill people. He also enjoyed talking about the people he killed and smiled the whole time while doing so. In the end, he was convicted for killing 4 individuals. Moving on to number 3, we have Damien Folks. In 2002, Damien Folks was sentenced to 12 years for a series of armed robberies that he had committed. But while in jail, he committed even more crimes. In 2010, he attempted to kill another prison inmate. He made a DIY shank by melting a razor blade onto plastic cutlery, and he used it to slice a guy's throat. As a result, he was transferred to a higher security prison. But that did not stop him. A year later, he killed an inmate by strangling him to death with strips of his bedding. These attacks gained him the title of being an extremely dangerous prisoner. In our 2nd spot today, we have Alexander Pikushkin. Alexander is a Russian serial killer who wanted to complete the number of squares on a chessboard by killing 64 people. It's said that he has killed around at least 49 individuals and possibly as many as 60. In fact, he was inspired by another serial killer, Andrei Chikatilo, who I have talked about before. In his mind, he wanted to compete with him and kill even more individuals than Andrei did. Now, what I find the weirdest is when Alexander was young, he was said to be such a kind and sociable child. That was until one day when he got struck in the head by a swing. From then on, his whole demeanor completely changed and he got really aggressive. So they think that this accident turned him into a serial killer. And in our number 1 spot today we have Pedro Rodrigues Filho, aka the Brazilian Maniac. This guy is a Brazilian serial killer who claims to have taken the lives of 100 individuals. He started killing at a young age, one of the first kills being his father. He apparently killed his father with a machete, cut out his heart, and then chewed on it. He also has been known to kill and torture a number of gang members. He did this all before he was 18. He was arrested on May 24th of 1973, during which he was placed in a car with another criminal who he killed for no reason. And while in prison, he went on to kill more people. It's said that he took the lives of 47 inmates in jail alone. Pedro served 42 years in prison before his release in 2018. Yes, he killed that many people and then he got released.